The cigarette smoke curled upward in the dim office, illuminated only by the glow of a computer screen and the fading evening light. My boss, Richard, hadn't spoken a word since I'd asked to leave early. The silence between us stretched like a rubber band ready to snap. I stood there, keys in hand, watching as he took another long drag, his eyes never meeting mine. That's when I realized, he wasn't just my boss anymore. He was a man consumed by jealousy, and I was about to pay the price for simply wanting a life beyond these walls. If you've ever felt trapped between your responsibilities and your right to happiness, this story might resonate with you. Like, subscribe, and join me on this journey that changed everything about how I view work, love, and standing up for what matters. My name is Emma Reeves, and 6 months ago, I was just another overworked assistant at Meridian Publishing. I'd been there for 3 years, climbing from intern to executive assistant to Richard Klein, the company's notoriously demanding editorial director. Richard was brilliant, everyone knew it. He had an eye for bestsellers and could transform a mediocre manuscript into gold. But brilliance came with a cost. He expected everyone around him to match his dedication, which meant early mornings, late nights, and weekends sacrificed to the altar of publishing deadlines. I didn't mind, not really. I was 28, single, and determined to learn everything I could about the industry. My apartment was just a place to sleep between workdays. My social life had dwindled to occasional text messages with friends I rarely saw. Dating? That had become a distant memory. Then came Jake Sullivan. I met him at the coffee shop across from our office building. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was juggling Richard's complicated coffee order, my own Americano, and a stack of manuscripts when someone held the door open for me. "Looks like you could use an extra hand," he said, his voice warm and deep. I looked up to see kind brown eyes and a smile that reached them. He was tall, with dark hair peppered with just enough gray to suggest experience rather than age. "Thanks," I managed, embarrassed by how flustered I felt. It had been so long since I'd noticed a man, really noticed him. "Jake," he said, following me inside. "Emma," I replied. We ended up in line together, and he insisted on carrying Richard's coffee to the counter for me. Our conversation was brief, just a few minutes of small talk, but when he left, I found myself smiling for no reason. The next day, he was there again. And the day after that. By Friday, we'd established a morning ritual of sorts. He'd hold the door, we'd chat in line, and then go our separate ways. I learned he was an architect with his own small firm in the building next to mine. He'd moved to the city 8 months ago for a fresh start. It was during our second week of coffee shop encounters that he mentioned his daughter. "Lily's science project is killing me," he said with a laugh. "I'm an architect, not a biologist. I spent 3 hours last night trying to understand photosynthesis enough to help her." "You have a daughter?" I asked, surprised. His expression softened. "Yeah, she's 11. The light of my life, even when she's making me build volcano models at midnight." "And her mom?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Jake's smile dimmed slightly. "She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer." "I'm so sorry," I said, meaning it. He nodded, acknowledging my sympathy without dwelling on it. "It's been Lily and me against the world since then. We're doing okay." Something about the way he said it, the quiet strength, the lack of self-pity, touched me deeply. Here was a man who had faced real loss and was still standing, still smiling, still holding doors open for strangers. The following Monday, Jake was waiting for me outside the coffee shop. "I was wondering," he said, looking uncharacteristically nervous, "if you might want to have dinner sometime? With me, I mean. And not at 6 a.m. over coffee." I felt a flutter of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. "I'd like that." We exchanged numbers, and I floated into work that day. Richard noticed immediately. "You're distracted," he said, frowning at me over his reading glasses. The Harrington manuscript needs to be reviewed by end of day. I need your full attention. Sorry, I said, forcing myself to focus. But throughout the day, my phone buzzed with texts from Jake, each one making me smile. We set our date for Friday night. Nothing fancy, just dinner at a small Italian place he knew. I was looking forward to it all week, counting down the days with an anticipation that made even Richard's demanding schedule seem bearable. Friday arrived, and I made sure to complete all my tasks early. By 5:30 p.m., I had everything in order. Our office officially closed at 6 o'clock, but Richard rarely left before 8 o'clock, and he expected me to stay until he was done. At 5:45, I knocked on his office door. "Come in," he called, not looking up from his computer. I took a deep breath. "Richard, I've finished everything for today. Would it be possible for me to leave at 6? I have plans tonight." He looked up then, his blue eyes sharp. "Plans? What kind of plans could be more important than the Jenkins proposal? We need to finalize it tonight." "I've already reviewed it," I said. "All the changes are made, and it's ready for your final approval. I have a date." Something flickered across his face, surprise, followed by something darker. "A date," he repeated, as if testing the word. "I wasn't aware you were seeing anyone." "It's new," I admitted. "First date, actually." Richard leaned back in his chair, studying me. At 45, he was still handsome in a severe way, all sharp angles and intensity. He'd been divorced twice, a fact that the office gossips attributed to his workaholic tendencies. "Who is he?" Richard asked. The question caught me off guard. "Just someone I met." "He's an architect." "An architect," Richard echoed. "How conventional." I felt a flare of annoyance. "He's also a single dad. His daughter is 11. That seemed to surprise him. "A single father? Emma, do you really want to get involved with someone's ready-made family? The complications, the baggage." "It's just dinner," I interrupted, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Richard fell silent, his fingers drumming on his desk. Then he reached into his drawer and pulled out a pack of cigarettes, something I'd never seen him do in the office before. He'd mentioned once that he only smoked during times of extreme stress or contemplation. "Richard, the no-smoking policy." He ignored me, lighting the cigarette with deliberate slowness. The flame from his lighter briefly illuminated his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw. "You know," he said, exhaling a stream of smoke toward the ceiling, "I've always appreciated your dedication, Emma. Your willingness to put in the hours, to prioritize your career. It's rare to find someone so aligned with my own work ethic." I shifted uncomfortably. "I'm still dedicated to my job." "Are you?" He took another drag. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're choosing some architect with a kid over your professional responsibilities." The unfairness of his statement stung. "That's not true. I've completed everything you asked of me today. I'm just asking to leave on time for once." Richard's expression hardened. "On time? As if this is some factory job with a time clock. This is publishing, Emma. This is art and commerce and deadlines that don't care about your dating life." I felt my cheeks flush with anger and embarrassment. "I understand that, but—" "Do you?" he cut in. "Because I'm not sure you do. I took a chance on you 3 years ago. I've mentored you, trained you, given you opportunities that most assistants would kill for. And this is how you repay that investment? By walking out the door the minute some man shows interest." His words hit like slaps. I'd never seen this side of Richard, possessive, almost personal in his disapproval. "That's not fair," I said quietly. "I've given everything to this job. Nights, weekends, holidays. I've cancelled plans, missed family events. I've been here whenever you needed me. And I need you now, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous softness. The Jenkins proposal is done, I insisted. Everything is done. I made sure of it. Richard took another long drag of his cigarette, the smoke creating a haze between us. In that moment, I saw something in his eyes I'd never noticed before: loneliness. Deep, aching loneliness masked by ambition and demands. You know, he said finally, I had plans for you, Emma. I saw potential. Executive editor within 5 years, maybe even editorial director someday. But if your priorities are shifting. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. I stood straighter. My priorities include having a life outside these walls, Richard. That doesn't make me less committed to my career. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. That's what my first wife said. Right before she left. The comparison unsettled me. I'm not your wife, Richard. I'm your assistant. His eyes narrowed. Yes. You are. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken tensions. I glanced at my watch, 5:55. Jake would be waiting for me in an hour. I need to go, I said finally. Richard took one last drag of his cigarette before crushing it in a coffee mug on his desk. If you walk out that door now, Emma, things will change between us. You understand that, don't you? It was a threat, plain and simple. Stay and maintain his favor, or leave and face the consequences. For 3 years, I'd built my life around this job, around Richard's needs and demands. I'd convinced myself it was necessary, that the sacrifice was worth it for my career. But standing there, watching him try to manipulate me with the promise of advancement or the threat of demotion, I suddenly saw our relationship for what it was: unhealthy, unbalanced, and ultimately unsustainable. I understand perfectly, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And I'm still leaving. I'll see you Monday morning. I turned and walked out, half expecting him to call me back, to fire me on the spot. But there was only silence behind me, and the faint smell of cigarette smoke that followed me down the hallway. Outside, the early evening air felt like freedom. I took a deep breath, trying to process what had just happened. Had I just risked my career for a first date? Was Richard's reaction normal boss behavior, or something more concerning? My phone buzzed with a text from Jake, looking forward to tonight. Take your time getting ready, no rush. His consideration, so different from what I'd just experienced, brought tears to my eyes. I blinked them away and headed home to get ready, determined not to let Richard's behavior ruin my evening. The date with Jake was everything I'd hoped for. The restaurant was small and intimate, with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. Jake was attentive and easy to talk to, asking questions about my life and actually listening to the answers. So you work in publishing, he said as we shared a tiramisu. Do you enjoy it? The question gave me pause. Did I enjoy it? I loved books, loved the process of helping shape a manuscript into something special. But the environment, the expectations, Richard. I love the work, I said carefully. The workplace is complicated. Jake nodded, understanding in his eyes. I get that. Before I started my own firm, I worked for a company that nearly broke me. 60-hour weeks, constant pressure, a boss who thought personal lives were for the weak. That sounds familiar, I admitted. What happened today? He asked gently. You seemed upset when we first sat down. I hesitated, then found myself telling him about Richard, about his reaction to my leaving early, about the cigarette and the veiled threats. Jake listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly concerned. Emma, he said when I finished, that's not normal boss behavior. That's controlling and manipulative. I know, I sighed. I think I've known for a while, but I've been making excuses. He's brilliant at what he does, and working with him has taught me so much. At what cost, though? Jake asked. Your time, your happiness, your chance to have relationships outside of work? His words hit home. I'd been so focused on my career that I'd forgotten to build a life alongside it. Tell me about Lily, I said, wanting to shift the conversation away from my work problems. Jake's face lit up. She's amazing. Smart, funny, stubborn as hell. She's at that age where she's figuring out who she is, testing boundaries. It's terrifying and wonderful to watch. How does she feel about you dating? I asked. Cautiously optimistic, he said with a smile. She's protective of me, but she also wants me to be happy. She made me promise to tell her all about you when I get home tonight. And what will you tell her? Jake looked at me, his gaze warm. That I met someone who makes me laugh, who's smart and kind, and who I'd really like to see again. By the end of the night, we'd made plans for the following weekend, this time including Lily. It would be a casual lunch and maybe a movie, nothing too intense for a first meeting. I went home feeling lighter than I had in years, despite the confrontation with Richard. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was choosing myself, my happiness, over the demands of my job. Monday morning arrived too quickly. I'd spent the weekend alternating between replaying my wonderful date with Jake and dreading my return to the office. What would Richard be like? Would he make good on his veiled threats? I arrived early, determined to be professional and prepared for whatever came my way. Richard was already there, his office door closed. I settled at my desk, checked his calendar, and began preparing for the day as usual. At 9 a.m. sharp, his door opened. Emma, he said, his voice neutral. My office, please. I followed him in, noticing that the coffee mug with the cigarette butt was gone, the air freshened. He'd erased the evidence of his moment of weakness. Sit down, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I did, keeping my expression composed despite the anxiety churning in my stomach. Richard studied me for a moment, his face unreadable. I owe you an apology, he said finally. Of all the things I'd expected, an apology wasn't one of them. My behavior on Friday was unprofessional, he continued. I allowed personal feelings to interfere with our working relationship, and that was inappropriate. I nodded, unsure how to respond. However, he added, his tone shifting slightly, I stand by my concern about your commitment. This job requires sacrifice, Emma. You knew that when you took it. I am committed, I said firmly. But I'm also entitled to a personal life. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Richard leaned forward. In this industry, at this level, they often are. I've seen promising careers derailed by outside distractions. Is that what happened to your marriages? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. That's not relevant to this discussion. Isn't it? I pressed. You're asking me to choose between my career and any chance at a personal life. I'm wondering if that's the choice you made. Richard's jaw tightened. My personal choices are none of your concern. And mine shouldn't be yours, I countered. Yet here we are. A tense silence fell between us. I could see Richard reassessing me, perhaps seeing for the first time that I wasn't just his compliant assistant. Let me be clear, he said finally. I value your work. You're the best assistant I've had. But if your priorities are shifting, if you can no longer give this job the attention it requires, then perhaps we need to reevaluate your position. It was a softer version of Friday's threat, but a threat nonetheless. I took a deep breath. Richard, I've never missed a deadline. I've never failed to complete a task you've assigned. I've worked nights, weekends, and holidays without complaint. All I'm asking for is the right to leave at the scheduled end of my workday when I have personal plans. And if there's a crisis? A deadline? An important client? Then I'll assess the situation and make a decision based on the actual circumstances, not a hypothetical emergency that might never happen. Richard sat back, studying me. This architect, he said finally. He must be quite something to inspire such backbone. This isn't about Jake, I said. It's about me setting boundaries that should have been.